Well, here we are on a Friday morning, and both our viewers have been starved of us for some time, but we're back. We're back, Pat. We said we'd be back, and we are back
And we are back.
with vengeance. Anyway, how's the
You
farm this
sound like
morning?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Huh? Exactly. Sorry. Hasta
I
la
will be
vista,
back.
baby.
No, it's a nice morning, Jude. It's exactly roasting, but it's nice. Now, Jude, I should point out that I was away in Spain. Just
Yeah, rub it in. Go on, rub it in. Rub it in.
rub it in. Jude, let me tell you, inform our two viewers. Someone maybe we should be grateful for our climate sometimes. But when I left Spain last Tuesday, it was 34 degrees. Apparently, it's going to be 40 this weekend, and they're already concerned about drought. It hasn't rained for someone like the biblical 40 days, and they are really concerned, and the reservoirs are very low. So when you look out there and you see the green fields and the plenty of growth
Yeah.
and all the rest, maybe we should be grateful.
I remember that as a kid. Our teacher told us, we live in a temperate climate, and
That's the word I keep remembering as well. Yeah.
And we said, no, God, there's always raining. He says, that's what I'm talking about. There's rain and there's
Yeah.
Anyway, to matters political and financial, the budget for here, that is in the occupied territory, has been decided by Chris Heaton-Harris, and he's announced it. You've got a thing about it, Pat. There's some.
There's no doubt about it, Jude, and let's get this on the record. I am no financial or economic expert, but the political impact of it, basically, what he's saying, and this is my understanding of it, that it's a flat budget, and it basically not too far removed from the one that was last year.
Yeah.
And now, on the surface, that sounds great. Well, that's fair enough.
Not great, but okay.
Yeah, but it's absolute bollocks. For starters, last year, the Northern Ireland got a 300 emergency budget to plug a few holes. So that has to be paid. Now, he's been very decent. He says that can be paid rather than just over 1 year, over 2 years.
Why didn't he make it 3 or 4, Pat?
Exactly, but he didn't. Over 2. That's the first thing. Secondly, he's like things like a budget for health. I think it's about 7.2 billion this year.
Mm-hmm.
It was 7.2 billion last year. But Jude, what he hasn't said there is inflation is rampant. It's at least double, possibly in some cases treble. Workers, their pay increases, which will be agreed in Britain, are running at maybe 5 and 6%, and maybe 10 or 11% over 2-3 years. He hasn't budgeted for that at all. And then there's also all sorts of costs of living that are impacting on staff. Hasn't budgeted for that at all. So I would think it could be a winter of discontent, big time, because of staff and the health service in Northern Ireland. See people in England getting pay increases and they're not getting as well. And by the way, Heaton-Harris says the repayment of the 300 million takes priority over any staff and pay increases because we have to stay within our budget. So on. So Jude, it is a punishment budget, and anybody who doesn't think it's so. By the way, just to add on another thing, remember when in 2016 when Brexit was happening, there were all sorts of promises made that all sorts of European social funding will be matched pound for pound by the British government. Yes. When you're right, go and tell all the people in the Craigan and the Bogside and the Falls Road and all those areas where there's severe deprivation, etc. Are there social funds, for classes for old people, for language classes, for people where people can meet in the morning for cups of coffee, and where kids who are maybe socially deprived can meet and the mothers can meet? No, it's going to be cut to the bone, Jude. And already in places like Craigan, they're saying the social funding for a lot of projects that help the community have been cut by as much as 50%. So, Jude, there's going to be a lot more deprivation, and it's the poor who's going to pay for it one more time.
I think at the root of this, I agree with what you say, Pat. Indeed, it's typical Tories. Say we're doing the decent thing, and we're keeping it at the same level, and in fact, that means that it's shrinking by God knows what due to inflation and so on. But it's like, in a way, what's happening with Radio Foyle. BBC Radio Foyle is being slashed to pieces because somebody else runs it. BBC lives in London, doesn't live in Derry, doesn't even live in Belfast, lives in London. Yes. So they call the shots from there. The same applies to the budget. we don't have any control here. And even the Assembly was sitting, I still wouldn't have control over what subvention we get. Every year, the North of Ireland puts out the begging bowl, and Britain kindly fills it. And what we're seeing is this year, they're not giving us as much as they usually do. I can't help but notice the stark difference. Now, this could be a mistake on my part, but between the state of the economy in and taxation and budget and so on in the north and in the south. The south's got what, a surplus of 10 billion or something, or 6? Is it going to be 16
at least,
billion next year?
They're talking about in the next, what is it, 3 years or something, possibility of a 65 billion surplus.
You see, they have control over the levers, whereas we don't have any control over. And even to say that if the executive was working, we still wouldn't have any control over taxation. And taxation, if you go back to the old thing, no taxation without representation. And even with representation.
You've just hit on something that when I hear Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin talking about what Sinn Féin's policies in the north are radically different to the ones in the south, I go bananas, because I think that is so dishonest. And it's a mandatory coalition in the north. It is a government in the south. There's no tax, or there are no tax raising provisions in the north. They are in the south. It's an administration in the north. It's a government in the south. So in other words, if Sinn Féin want to do anything, they have to bring everybody else along with them. So that's impossible. So the dishonesty when they sort of say no, and like Sinn Féin, of course, then they're sort of hamstrung when they reply. They can't reply sort of and say we're not in government in the north. So they just have to take that in the chin. But Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar and these people know that they're not, when they start talking about policies in the north, they're not comparing apples with apples, and they know it.
For sure. Just to go sideways, then we'll move on to another item. The health budget in the south has been increased dramatically, I gather. But there's only going to be, according to Irish Times today and Paul Cullen, there's only going to be 162 extra beds. How is this possible? Because I scanned the article, and at no point did the article seek to offer the reason why, with an increased budget for health, a record high budget for health, that there's only 162 more beds. Why is that?
And the other thing as well, even though 162, there's no guarantees they'll have the staff to sort of support those beds. The walkout from the staffing levels in the south are enormous. People are the nurses and doctors are getting double the pay in Australia and Canada than they are here. They're also much better terms and conditions, and they're walking out at a massive.
I accept,
there's something.
I accept that, but my point is, I still don't get it. If you've got a record health budget, how is it that you only have 162 extra beds? Surely it should be.
Jude, I read the article you're talking about. There's no explanation for it. In fact, David Cullinan of Sinn Féin is sort of asking what's going on here. And a lot of people. Jude, there's £1 billion being spent this year alone on capital funding. £1,000 million on capital, and nobody seems to know where it's going. And Jude, there's a whole lot of factors. But here, look, we have a growing population in the south, a rapidly growing population in the south. We have an aging population. We have also a lot of sort of immigrants, and we have the people coming in from refugees from places like Ukraine and so on. I don't know if you can call them refugees, but anyway, so on. So the demands on the services are growing, big time. And you sort of go, what sort of people are in charge that, even though we're spending this amount of money, we don't seem to be able to deliver anything worthwhile? And it's the same applies to the schools. The schools are overflowing, and I better not say it because we're going to start talking about personal experience. But anyway, one of my family's involved in a school. I think they have had to get 2 or 3 of these prefab things, and they cost a fortune. Why don't they build schools with sort of a 10% or 15% over capacity, so when they need it, it's there, rather than build schools that are smaller, and then by the time they're finished, they need to start building again.
But I think that's because the politicians think short term. They think to the next election, and beyond that's too much. So they'd rather show the porta cabin now rather than the school that's going to be there in 10 years' time. Okay, let's leave that for a moment, because there's so many other things. One of the things that's on the menu for everybody, I would say, in Ireland, certainly in the north, is the fact that Michelle O'Neill and Alex Maskey are going to the coronation of King Charles III. Now, I met a woman this morning, and she says, "Here, have a look at this." And she showed me a photograph, and it was a photograph of Michelle O'Neill, and it says, "On my way to the coronation," and she's dressed in, like, it's mock-up, she's dressed in a Union Jack from head to foot. So is that a deserved, like, with that, is that the DUP having a laugh at the way the Shinners are acting, or what's your view?
No, Jude, right, let me tell you, I can see the hardline Republicans and the DUP think this is hilarious, but both are totally, in my opinion, wrong. I think Sinn Féin are absolutely playing a blinder, and the fact that they're wanting hands down. Dude, even David McWilliams saying the last day on the Irish Times that Sinn Féin are basically winning the image war big time. Right, Jude, remember this. Look at the DUP now. They've alienated just about. They play to their gallery. They play to their hardmen. They play to the loyalist community, PUL, every time. And they're going down, down, down. They're losing right, left, and center. Even Heaton Harris and Rishi Sunak, and last week, basically slapped them down. Says it's either the Windsor Framework, or the union starts to, it's more, you're heading towards United Ireland. They have alienated right, left, and centre. Right, the other way around. Michelle O'Neill is saying, as First Minister, I will represent everyone. She's going over to London. She said, I am an Irish Republican. She's going to the coronation as Irish Republican, but she's showing respect for their tradition. But they're still keeping their eye on the main prize, which is Irish unity. And she is losing nothing, and I mean nothing. In fact, possibly gaining friends and influence and key parts of the British Empire to sort of bring along. Because I'm working on the premise at this stage, Jude, that the Brits really don't give a shit about Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree with everything you said. I did a blog on this, and I must say my instinctive sort of reaction was, what the hell is she going? What's a Republican going to King Charles, to this absurdity of a monarchy and seeming to celebrate it? That was my first reaction, and it'd be a very satisfying thing to say that, rubbish.
Just play to your own crowd.
Yeah. So, but it really is quite astute. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. If she says she's going to be a minister for everybody, First Minister for everybody in the north, then the fact of the matter is there is an awful lot of royalists, and they're not all unionists either. There are some nationalist royalists. You've got to represent them. So she's doing that in a very visible way. And that seems to me extraordinarily, you'd have to be pretty confident, self-confident, secure in your own skin to do that kind of thing. And it also, as I said in this blog, it also drives people nuts. Your enemies go nuts when you do the decent thing.
The DUP, you can see, by the way, the day that Michelle met Prince Charles after his mother died, the Queen died, there was a genuine warmth there. You could see that he chatted away to her, much more so than he chatted to any of the unionists. And the secret of success and getting and achieving your ambition is to win friends and influence people. And Sinn Féin are doing it. Now, I think there's some people, I read there last week, James Connolly wouldn't have done this, and Patrick Pearse would. Look, that's 100 years ago. They weren't dealing with social media. They were, they used to use horses during a full, when they were attacking somewhere. Then along came tanks. So things changed, dude. And this is 2023. You have all the sort of propaganda war. You've got social media. And the times have changed. Sinn Féin are using the tactic. And Jude, the evidence that Sinn Féin are succeeding is overwhelming. So does somebody want them to, right, would you prefer things like Gregory Campbell saying about the Irish language and annoying people, the curry my yogurt and stuff? No, play to your own gallery and make you sound good. But hey, if Gregory was trying to get nationalists on side, that is not the way to do it. Michelle is trying to get unionists and loyalists on side, and that is the way to do it.
Yeah, I'd say the DUP is deeply disappointed that she's going, because it would have given them something to talk about other than the fact that they're not in the executive. This shows that even regardless, I mean, if anything, it puts a hotter spotlight on the obdurate, if that's the word, attitude of the DUP not going to. Well, what did you say there?
That was a nice word.
I'm obdurate, very
Obdurate.
obdurate, very obdurate, very stubborn. Anyway, here's a quotation from her. We'll move on from there. This is Michelle ONeill speaking. I am committed to being a First Minister for all, representing the whole community, building good relations between the people of these islands, and advancing peace and reconciliation through respectful and mature engagement. Wow, there's an adult talking. There's an adult talking.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on to one or two other. Here's one that got to me, and it's an article by Stephen Collins. And he's saying the south of Ireland would want to wise up that it isn't capable of defending itself, and it should be plugging into NATO as quickly as possible and not offloading its security to Britain. The British fighter jets have to scramble and all the rest whenever the Russian fleet appears off the coast of the south of Ireland. What's your thoughts on that, Pat? Is he right?
I'm amazed that when Joe Biden came to Ireland, there was a guy I remember reading, a Colonel Richard Kemp. I think he's a retired brigadier or some, or not brigadier, colonel obviously. But anyway, he was writing the Daily Telegraph, and he said Ireland was freeloading off Britain, etc., etc., etc. Now, okay, Jude, he's got a point. There's no doubt about that. We only spend, I think it's not 0.3% of the budget on defence, which is not exactly a lot of money. But here's the other thing. Let's get this clear before we go on. Britain doesn't come to Ireland's defence when the Russians come here. They come to their own defence. They scramble for all sorts of reasons. But you're right, we sort of are freeloading to an extent. Jude, as far as I know, we have only got something like 6,000 soldiers. We've got 6, I think, naval frigates. 2 of them have been mothballed because they haven't got staff to, But the reason that the wages and the terms and conditions for soldiers and navy are atrocious. The pay is awful, and when you come out of it, it's near penury. So the people just aren't joining. So if we're serious about, and the Republic I'm talking about our defence, we'd seriously need to up the budget. Now, Jude, there are issues about what last year. It's a different kind of security, but Russian hackers got into the HSE, the health service, and that cost something like 200-300 million, Jude, at a time when the health service was under severe funding problems. By the way, I think it's off the coast of Cove and Cork. The transatlantic lines, that connect us with the outside world. And by the way, Jude, that's where our 10 billion surplus comes from all this high tech stuff. Those lines that connect Ireland to Europe and to North America are under the sea. Now, Russian ships have been in and out of there this last couple of, and I presume just deliberately to sort of up the tempo. But you're right, Russian divers could easily go down there and blow those lines out. So we should be seriously looking towards our own security. But we're a very small nation. Who the hell are we going to take on?
Well, you're a small state anyway, whatever big nation. Stephen Collins quoted from this diplomat he knew, Eastern European diplomat, and the diplomat said, "It seems to me that for all the celebrations of your 100 years of independence, Irish people are happy to have your country defended by the British at no cost to yourselves." Now, on the face of that, I would say an awful lot of people in the South would agree with that. But I would raise this question. I think it's missing something very important. It's suggesting that 100 years of independence has been enjoyed by Ireland. Ireland has not enjoyed 100 years of independence. There's only one country that has got an army on Ireland's soil, and that's the British Army. So, there are people who would say, would you listen to Collins now? The old, nation. What old-fashioned thinking. I would suggest that this is doublethink. People have been conned into thinking that that's something different. Leave that aside. We're really talking about the Russians and so on. Well, I would talk about the Russians cheerfully, but I wouldn't do it at the cost of saying, look, the north of Ireland is... let's face it, it is occupied, or it certainly is. There are British boots, let's say, soldiers' boots on the ground in the north of Ireland. So why is it that Stephen Collins is getting very upset about the state and its defence, and it's not joining NATO, but he's not one bit concerned about, in fact, if anything, he's a proponent of maintaining British presence here. Leave that aside too. I would also say this. I don't think the South should become part of NATO. Full stop.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's all sorts of difficulties attached to that, but I mean, Switzerland for years and years and years, generations, was an independent country, and people admired her for it. Ireland, the south of Ireland, the Free State, whatever it was called then, stayed out of the Second World War, and bloody well good for them, is all I can say. If you're an independent country or state, you should be allowed to make your own decisions. You shouldn't have other people telling you what you're to do. So my suggestion to the people of Ireland is, don't let anybody use joining NATO as a lever towards a united Ireland, because that's what they're trying to do right now. They're trying to use this. They say, you join NATO and we'll allow you to have your country back. That's a price I wouldn't be prepared to pay. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very good point you made, Jude. And in fact, I hadn't thought of that. But when you think about it, Britain is defending its own interests because it's got interest in it. And when you look, Jude, frequently when I hear guys coming on from the PSNI, and I'm still amazed by the number of English accents, superintending this and chief and constable this and whatever, and and the number of officials like Heaton Harris is basically our sovereign in Northern Ireland, because he's the guy who's making the decision. Does he sound like he's got an Irish accent to you? So the British interests are very much still, as to use your terms, boots on the ground in Northern Ireland. So when they scramble jets, they're scrambling jets to look after their own territory. Not that I agree with that they should be here at all. I am not a rabid Republican.
And the other thing, of course, that adds to that is that the North is totally dependent on the British Exchequer for running the place. I mean, they simply can't do it. Unionists use that as something to boast about. I frankly would have thought it was something to keep quiet about, because what you're saying is, if we were left on our own, we wouldn't exist. We're not capable of being. Except we're on a life support system.
Let's go back to Charlie Haughey's famous one, and then we'll probably move on. That this is a failed entity. Like, Jude, politically, it's failed. Socially, it's failed. Religious-wise, it's failed. Economically, whatever other way you want to, you can keep going. Like, any place that's dependent on a handout to keep going, why did you boast about that? Oh, you couldn't afford us because we get so much from London. What's proud about that?
Yeah. Okay, let's move on sideways a wee bit and talk about the fact that last week, Rishi and Heaton Harris told the DUP that the Windsor Framework was the only sure way that the union would be secure. So, are that implications for Jeffrey?
Jude, I thought that was a massive statement, and it seemed to get underplayed quite a lot. I was missing because I was in Spain, but I looked it up and I thought, this is the first time, as far as I can see, that the Daily Telegraph's headline said, a United Ireland's on the way unless you guys back down, or not back down, but back this framework document. Basically, he was saying you back down from where you're at because you're actually imperiling the union. Because if you don't agree to this, the rest of Britain's not going to support you. And that's basically the situation, because what was it, Jude? 515 to 29 or whatever the hell it was. Vote for the framework document. Right. I read Jim Shannon, the DUP guy, got up in the House of Commons there earlier this week, and he said that he described Heaton Harris's words as inflammatory, recent comments that he was basically slapping unionists down. And Heaton Harris responded by saying, I don't retract a word. In my opinion, the Windsor Framework document is the only way forward. And if you guys choose to reject that, you're imperiling the union. And I am a union supporter. I want the union to work, etc., etc. So, Jude, I don't know what I'm missing unless you have seen something like that. But as far as I can see, this is public, which I presume has been in private a long time. Public statement. How pissed off the guys in London are with the DUP, and it's an obduracy, to use your words.
And their obduracy. I have a theory, Pat, that all of that is absolutely correct. The DUP would want to realise that and not be kidding themselves. But I think that the British government have a little goodie and it'll plug into this recent budget, some kind of concession, extra money, maybe something like that, or some tiny change to the Windsor Framework, that the DUP can then hold it over their heads and say, look what we got, look what we got. You see, we got them to renegotiate. We got this huge amount of money for Northern Ireland. So they'll be able to present themselves in a favourable light. And that'll give them a fig leaf to get back into the executive. Would you think, is that being too Machiavellian?
No, I have very little doubt that there's something down the track. But Jude, I listened to more than the DUP. No, this is so, and I don't mean it to be as offensive as it's going to come across. But I think, are their political strategists morons? Because Jude, every time that they take a stance like this, they seem to come back in a weaker position. Every time, they have like, even I can't remember who I read there quite recently saying they have this sort of tardiness and reaching a decision has just pissed everybody off. Right, Jude? Yeah, add up the 2 or 3 factors. They pissed off Westminster. They pissed off the EU. We've got a punishment budget. The services here are going to hell. Sinn Féin are riding high. The demographics are changing. What more slap across the face does unionism need to get to wise up and say, wait a minute, we better start reaching out. We better start making friends and influence people. We better start sort of trying to get to use your term, the soft nationalists. Where if you want to maintain the union and the numbers are decreasing, the only way you're going to maintain the union is reach out, make deals, make friends, sort of say, well, look, see, in Irish language, no big deal, doesn't cost us anything. If you want it, go ahead. Things like that, pragmatic politics, but they're not doing any of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think in ways, though, it might be like a car skidding. You know this thing when your car's skidding, they always tell you steer into the direction it's going rather than trying to wrench the wheel away from it. They say steer into it. Now, that may well be the case, but all your instincts are to pull away from it, even though that's probably the worst thing you could do. So I think it's the same thing with the DUP. They see what appears to be they're sliding towards a united Ireland, and they say, oh, geez, we've got to do something. And they do something that actually is counterproductive, that actually increases the pace of moving towards a crash or into the united Ireland, as the case may be. But I mean, sometimes I feel sorry for them. I do feel sorry for them, actually. And I would love to see, I tell you, I really mean this. I would love to see I won't see it before the local elections for sure, but I'd love to see the DUP make some kind of gesture comparable with Michelle ONeill and Alex Maskey's going to the coronation. And I'm not sure what that would be, but if they were able to do that really would be a subject for rejoicing. These are Irish people we're talking about. The DUP are Irish people who have lived here for hundreds of years. This is what we sometimes forget because they want to link with Britain. We forget that these are our fellow countrymen. So I would love to see somebody having the guts or the vision to, get themselves out of the shock that they're in and do something that people would stand back and say, well done to you, fair play. That shows your degree of open-mindedness and progressiveness that we hadn't seen before. Well done. So that'd be my wish. Have I been silly to even wish that?
No, you're 100%. Jude, if you want to do silo politics, in other words, there's your silo, there's ours, and there's no in between. The DUP are doing brilliantly. They're playing, Ian. I remember the famous one when the Pope came to the EU and Ian Paisley got up and called him the Antichrist or something like that. And I remember saying to a very wise man at the time, because it was the whore of Babylon, exactly. What a term. Anyway, I remember saying to a very wise man, I was sort of young and naive. I was a Donegal man who was only new in Derry and whatever at the time. And I was chatting. I said, look at that clown and all the rest of it, and making himself and all the rest. He said, Pat, you're missing the point. And I said, what do you mean? Half of Europe's laughing at him and half the world's laughing. He says, he doesn't give a monkeys about half the world. He says, how do you think it's playing in Ballymena? He says, he'll top the poll at the next election. And he was 100% right. And that's exactly what it was. And
did you watch
unionism? Say again?
I was going to say, did you watch the House of Paisley that was on TV? There was a 3-part series.
No, Jude, I missed it. I got one part of it. It was absolutely excellent.
It was very interesting. I'll tell you, because it showed you the extent to which Paisley dominated created the DUP, created the Free Presbyterian Church, and in both was dumped. You know, he was tossed out of his church, and he was tossed out as the leader of the DUP. I hadn't quite appreciated that was actually the facts of the matter. It's a sort of a cruel kind of thing to happen, but maybe he should have been ready for it. That all the things that he had worked for and had led, it was surplus to requirements.
Yeah, and one of the things that made him surplus to requirements was actually going into government with Martin McGinnis. But Jude, we get back to your original point. Martin McGinnis. If anybody's seriously saying Martin McGinnis when he went to see the Queen had sold out, they've got to be. This is a guy who was, let's be honest, the leader of the IRA for a long time. His family and his life were sort of totally wrapped up in the Republican cause. For many years, he couldn't even sleep at home. At one stage, there was I think an attempt to actually kidnap his daughter or something, or there was concerns about that. His family paid a hell of a price for it, etc., etc., etc. I know he decided once the Good Friday Agreement that he would reach out and go along and meet the Queen. He also went on and met, remember, the chief constable and so on. He decided he was going to be a leader. No, he wasn't going to stay in the silo. That he was going to reach out and bring. Now, Jude, I think that is the proper way to go. That if I read your blog as well, and I saw some of the comments, about your piece about the Alex and Michelle going to meet the Queen. And some people, James Connolly wouldn't have done this and so on. I'm going, Jesus, wait a minute. James Connolly lived 120 years ago, whatever it was, 1916, whatever it was. And man, he's a hero of mine, I admire him. But hey, Jude, Martin McGinnis, Michelle O'Neill, and Sinn Féin are doing the right thing. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And we're back to the same. So I think if you're asking what is the strategy, and the strategy is working, I would say to people to seriously have a look at where Sinn Féin is now. And it's quite a possibility that within the next 10 years, they could be in government north and south. Yeah. And then I'd love to see what happens then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, indeed. Okay, let's leave those and go across the Atlantic in the short time we have left and look at what is happening in Fox News. They've had to pay out 787, I wonder where they have the exact figure, 787 million to Dominion voting systems, because they said publicly on their TV, you need to watch what you say, Pat. You see, I don't want to be having to pay $787 million because of something you say. But anyway, they said that the Dominion voting system was a fraud, essentially. It was rigging the vote. And good for Dominion voting. They says, no, thank you, we weren't. And as a result, Fox is out a cough up. Are there implications of that, is your question? And I'm asking you, you tell me.
No, what I thought, apparently, what is so amazing, and what do you call the guy? Tucker Carlson, who's been their main guy out front for years, and so on. He was sacked last Monday, or thereabouts anyway. And they paid 787 million, which I think is the biggest libel award ever, and so on. But here's the thing: before they went on air, these presenters and people and contributors knew these claims were false, and apparently they were alerted to the fact by producers and journalists and all the rest, saying, "Look, there's no substantiation of this at all, etc., etc., etc." And in fact, I think people like Carlson sort of said this is a joke and all the rest of it. But then they went on air and repeated all the stuff, that there were serious question marks about Dominion voting systems, that they had juggled the votes that were meant for Trump over to Biden, etc., etc. But the big question that came to my mind is Fox News more now? Are they just playing to their gallery? The truth doesn't matter. They're telling people what they want to hear. They are not interested in the facts. They're not interested. So, like, why are we considering Fox News and all this America? By the way, they're the biggest cable channel in America, and they're very, very wealthy and so on. Yet they don't seem to. Where are the rules, the guidelines? Surely there should be some sort of government guidelines that just telling people what they want to hear is no longer acceptable. That
Oh.
they has to be factually correct.
Aye, well, especially if you're just saying something that's really, really damaging, it goes to the core of political life. When you say, well, essentially the election of the president was rigged. If you're going to say that, you'd better be able to produce some evidence of it, and they weren't able to do it. Do you think there's any danger of that kind of thing being operative on this side of the Atlantic?
No, Jude, I don't think so. Jesus, Jude, as speaking as a former newspaper editor, the libel laws and the laws of defamation in Ireland and Britain, Jude, they're almost the exact opposite, Jude. And quite often in the past, there are journalists, and you could have several sources, and you know it's true. But they know the whole problem is, if I say Jude Collins did X, Y, and Z, if you say I'm going to sue you for that, there, Pat, the onus on me is to prove what I said is true. You don't have to say that it isn't true. All you have to say, but you prove it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Jude, I remember, it doesn't matter now because both of the people are dead, but I remember a certain official came to me one time, I'll not say where, and said X was receiving back payments. And he says, every so often, a brown envelope with $5,000 was appearing on his desk.
Yeah.
And I said, and he says, and he's getting all these, the guy who's paying the $5,000 getting all these contracts. When we looked at it, it was definitely 100% true. But Jude, I had no proof. All I had was a word from one guy who told me this, and we couldn't touch it. Now, Jude, if I was in America, I could say, Jude Collins is getting $5,000 from Pat McGarrett, and he's doing X, Y, and Z. And as long as there's an absence of malice, that there's a genuine that it's worth looking at, I could get away with it. Not a chance.
It's very interesting.
In fact, I'd probably be doing jail time.
So are you suggesting that the media on this side of the water, of the pond, is okay? What about things like UK News that the late First Minister, Arlene Foster, is working for now? Are they, even-handed, balanced, etc.?
Not at all. But Jude, you see, there's a difference between prejudice or bias than libel. It's like that big thing about, I remember Diane Abbott got into big trouble the other day because she said about the difference between prejudice and racism. Well, GB News is definitely, sure, they've got every sort of right-wing, well, I'm not saying anything, commentators they can find. They're making no attempt. They're trying to be Fox News. They're trying to be controversial. The only thing I'm giving the British people, and this is more sense than the Americans, because I think every loony tune in America tunes into Fox News. And by the way, Jude, they're not interested in the truth. They just want to hear what they want to hear.
Well, most people do, actually. Let's be fair. I mean, if somebody writes something you agree with, you say, that's bloody brilliant. We all have our own prejudices, I think. Tell me this. Do you think that, in general, the media are biased in Ireland/England against Sinn Féin?
Absolutely. Jude, the media in Ireland and Britain are pro-establishment, always have been, always will be. They will reflect the government, particularly the middle classes and upper classes.
Is there anything we can do about it?
Not really, no.
I wrote a letter to the Irish Times. I wrote a letter to the Irish Times this week, and they didn't print it. So,
what's the
point? What's the point? I'm trying to save the nation.
Here's the point. Why do you bother?
I don't know why. I'm going to emigrate one of these days. Okay, Pat, thank you very much. Talk to you.
See you later.